We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Mm. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
I'm Wayne Randall, finance editor with the National Black Unity News and host of the Finance Hour. I'm here with Sheila Brown. She's an author, a divine life strategist, a health coach, and speaker, not to mention an attorney at law with a Juris Doctorate. How you doing today, Miss Brown?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for asking. How are you today?
I'm here. I'm always grateful just to be here another day to try to achieve what I want to achieve and help uplift others in their quest and what they want to do too.
Right. That's
As we help
wonderful thing.
others, we're helping ourselves.
Right.
I want to say I'm glad that you are on the Finance Hour and a part of this author showcase. You were the last author to complete, the total of authors we were going to have in the women's showcase. And you fit the caliber of the other ladies that the predecessors before you. So it's I was waiting for you. I had a few other people, but you matched your background better matched the ladies that came before you. Okay. So you're part of a very unique caliber of women that's in the showcase, which you'll see later. Now, so for the readers and the viewers, I want to talk a little bit about the Divine Self QR strategy. What brought about the inspiration for this book?
Well, it's the Divine Self-Care strategy, and care is spelled with a Q so that throws people off on the pronunciation. But it's a part of my brand, which is Queendom Care. And Queendom Care is also spelled with a Q for the care part. So it's a part of my branding and how I distinguish myself. And so this book got started because I was working with women in this area of healing and wellness. But because of my background and my concern about the youth, and particularly as a woman of vision, I always equate the gift of wisdom that I received from my grandmother with the wisdom that I was able to incorporate into this book. And so the Divine Self-Care strategy, if everyone can see it, is written with the future in mind. It's written from the perspective of me as an 86-year-old grandmother talking to my unrealized and hoped for granddaughters and grandsons. And I am using 9 powerful chapters to not only convey to them how important it is for them to honor their temples, to connect back with that which is most natural in achieving their beauty and wellness strategies, but I'm also providing some historical context for doing so, with an eye as a Pan-Africanist on communicating to the future generations that they hail from a powerful legacy of healers, doctors, and freedom fighters who used 4 powerful tools that the Most High gave to us to secure both freedom and health. And I go into a long journey, if you will, but a powerful journey explaining to the youth, the unrealized youth of my future that I pray to come, that the work that the Divine Self-Care strategy seeks to get them to embrace as a tool for wellness, as a tool for critical thinking about relationships, and all of the pillars that a woman needs to consider as a part of her health and wellness regimen, meaning that we don't focus only on the body, but we focus on the body and the spirit and the mind, recognizing that there are relationships that contribute or diminish our wellness and health as human beings and as women and as creators. And so I set out by talking about my intentions in the first chapter, my desire as a mother and a grandmother, as a community healer, as an advocate, and as someone who's very concerned about the way our generations are being told and taught about what to expect, how to behave, how to perceive themselves. And I then proceed to tell some stories that were told of me using a little bit of science, a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of healing traditions, and a little bit of reasoning from my own work as a strategic planner and someone who's worked with behavioral health organizations to do really powerful work through a book that is a little deceiving in its title because the scope of what is covered is so forward thinking and so critical to the way we have to survive as a people. So, for example, I wanted to lay the groundwork that the work that I'm asking them to do on their bodies, focusing on their head, their womb, and their feet as young ladies, as the impetus for all things that they do. So it's not just the hair as the crown of the temple, but the entire head, which includes the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth, that these are important aspects of a woman's being, and that they correspond to the 4 tools that I refer to as a few tools, which is an acronym for air, fire, earth, and water, the building blocks of all things beauty, health, wellness, and freedom. Now, I set out to do this by going back in time and finding some documentation, looking at what our ancestors have already laid out for us in terms of how they related to these 4 elements as tools for liberation and health. I asked a question of the Divine One. How are you comfortable with your people being in this asymmetrical power dynamic with our oppressor? We oftentimes misguidedly refer to it as white supremacy. That's a misnomer. But what I wanted to get to the bottom to, as a woman writing a book, encouraging people to go back to nature, to reassess what they think they see as beauty and all of the props that are put before them as the leaders of the new school on what it is to be a woman or a man, the new school on what it is to be a community activist, to be a freedom fighter. I wanted to go back and bring them back to the source, a source, one of the sources. And in doing so, this book evolved out of that question. How are you comfortable? And the response that I got in my meditations from the divine was that you have everything you need to defeat your enemies. And so I contemplated that because it resonated with my soul, although I could not logically explain why there's still this asymmetrical power dynamic if this is true. And what I found was a gap between the past and the present, and an even widening gap between the present and the future. And I felt a great sense of urgency at that point to share the insights that I got. And I would love to share some with you if in your audience.
Please do.
Okay.
Do take me on that journey.
Yeah, so the premise again starts really in chapter 3, where I am trying to lay the groundwork for our future descendants, yours, mine, our neighbors, about how our ancestors strategically used the elements of air, fire, earth, and water to secure freedom and health. And I had gotten this download, and the download was that you have everything you need to defeat your enemies. And how air, fire, earth, and water came up was that sarcastically, in my own sense of doubt and a little bit of hypocrisy and humor, I said, well, created, it seems like the only thing you've ever given us was air, fire, earth, and water, and nothing more. And the response to that was, exactly, start right there.
Okay.
And what came up immediately after that was this quote. You've heard this quote.
Mhm.
I've heard this quote. It's by the Honorable Frederick Douglass. And the Honorable Frederick Douglass made this very powerful quote back in 1852 when he was invited to speak before the Ladies Anti-Slavery Society. And he was asked myself from one of Dr. Umar Johnson's lessons. And it stuck with me, but it didn't have the kind of weight that it has now. And that quote went like this: "It is not the light we need, but the fire. It is not the gentle shower, but the thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake." And so I said, well, that is cute. I like that. That does kind of give the sense of air, fire, earth, and water. I mean, certainly I could hear all the elements right there. It's not the light we need, but fire. That's one. Gentle shower represents the water. The storm, also a more pertinent part of the water. The whirlwind represented the air, and the earthquake represented the earth. So I was like, this is good. Okay. So I went back to the speech and I started to analyze the speech. And when I realized how brilliant our ancestor, Frederick Douglass, the Honorable One, was,
Yes.
and what he took the opportunity to do before that 600 group of people, and what the outcome intentionally was, that evidenced for me a divine relationship between freedom and health, and freedom and the divine, and courage and the four elements. And so, studying that speech further, I went on back and I found this really powerful metaphor that the Honorable Frederick Douglass is using to describe the destructive power of water. He's using the river, and then what he does at the end of this statement, it literally sent chills down every person in that audience's spine. And the reason is because he was making a comparison between, before I tell you that, let me just give you a little bit of what that statement was.
Okay.
Brilliantly, because this man was a very smart man, and he had already been in this battle with slavery. He had already wrestled with death and life. And so he had gotten some insights as he had to maneuver through nature in the course of achieving his own freedom. And he says, "Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep in the courses of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and refertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury and bear away on their angry waves the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock to howl in the abyss sweeping wind, the sad tale of departed glory." And this is when he said it: "As with rivers, so with nations." And I was like, whoa.
Okay.
Now, you got to keep in context, slavery is alive and well in all the forces of slavery. And he is supposed to be among friends celebrating for them their independence, their freedom from slavery, from the British. And he uses this opportunity to let them have it. "You are hypocrites," he's essentially saying. "How dare you? What to the slave is the 4th of July? Why did you bring me here? What do you need me to convince you that there is nothing divine in slavery? There's nothing divine in subduing your fellow man?" Now, interestingly enough, the people at that time took what he was saying very seriously. And although many of them considered themselves freedom fighters, or at least friends of the slaves, they were also very deeply concerned when this Black man, as tall and as powerful as he was, decided to take this opportunity where they were inviting him to celebrate their freedom, to use it to interrupt their sense of peace. Now, why did it have so much weight? Well, there was a prophet who was around a couple of years before him. He was such an important prophet to this group of people that when he told in the book that he wrote called Notes on the State of Virginia, you may be familiar with him, his name is Thomas Jefferson. He said, I tremble for my country when I think that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever. That by some turn of events, supernatural interference, a change of circumstances is possible. They were very deeply concerned about what was being put before them in the prophecy that they had already been warned and fearing with their whole hearts and beings. I think it's interesting to know that within 10 years, we get what the Honorable Frederick Douglass was asking for. That massive earthquake came in the form of the Civil War. And not only was the Civil War so devastating and so interrupting, just like the rivers are, so are nations, that it could take away in its quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, or in their angry waves. So what he was doing was really warning that group of people that if you do not reconcile with your oppressed masses, you will deal with these elements. And he got what he asked for, because within 7 years, which is next day mail as far as the cosmos is concerned, we had what is referred to as one of the world's biggest and most frightening EMPs, which is an electromagnetic pulse. The year was 1859. The event was called the Carrington event, and it shook the world. The skies were a light red. The heavens were doing all this majestic and frightening things, and people were very biblical at that time. And they were also very concerned, depending on where you were in relationship to slavery. Well, if you were an enslaved person, like Mother Harriet Tubman, or like Nat Turner, who said, it would then reveal to me the knowledge of the elements. I'm sorry, let me actually give you the direct quote, because this is so powerful. It would then reveal to me the knowledge of the elements, the revolution of the planets, the operation of tides, and the changes of the seasons. Clue number 2. He said, when he was being interviewed by Thomas Gray, this is after the revolution that he waged war on the proponents of slavery, and he is essentially being interviewed, and he's supposed to be terribly afraid. Thomas Gray says, what makes you think that you had the right, the power, the intelligence, and the courage to take on white power? And that was when he said, you have no idea who you're talking to. I've already seen the revelations about the elements, elements of air, fire, earth, and water. And then if you're not sure that that's what he meant, he talks about the revolution of the planets. 1830s? Why are you concerned about the planets and the elements? Who is he talking about? He was talking about his relationship with the Most High. Now, this really gets interesting because remember, I wrote a book about divine self-care, but the connection between divine self-care is about honoring your temple using the 4 elements, always remembering that at the source of all beauty is freedom, and at the source of all freedom are the tools of beauty and health, which are the 4 elements, which is rooted in history, historically, and proven by our ancestors, if you have an ear to hear. So I had written this really powerful chapter. It's chapter 3 in this book, The Divine Self-Care Strategy, right? I told you the cover and the title doesn't really do it justice.
That's okay. It's powerful.
You're going on a historical journey, but this was so important for me to do because I needed to lay the groundwork so that whatever I advise my daughters and your daughters to do in the future around freedom and health, it is rooted in something that is so far deeper than me. that connects them to the divine and to everything that our ancestors aspired for, using only the tools that were available to them. And in this day and time, where our enemies possess all the technology and all the power and all the legislation and all the control, it's important to know that there's still something we can access, right? Something divine and something in nature that doesn't require a license or some specialized knowledge that we don't already possess. Now, I had some really powerful revelations from Mother Harriet Tubman, from Mother Harriet Jacobs, and from 2 other enslaved people. And I had finished writing the chapter, and then comes the icing on the cake, King. I was listening to WPFW. It was January, it was 2019, and Dr. Martin Luther King's famous speech where he talks about being on the mountaintop and that he's not afraid anymore. Well, Dr. King really confirmed everything that I thought I knew about what the Honorable Frederick Douglass was saying. Now, you got to have some context for why this is important. He made this interesting statement that I want to share with you. He said, "Lord, help me to accept my tools. However dull they are, help me to accept them." Now, keep that in the back of your mind, King.
Right.
Well, this is the night before Dr. King's assassination. Powerful night, powerful energy. He is going through some deep emotional, spiritual turmoil. He must have sensed the urgency of now, because he does something in that speech that very few people have ever noted, that I had not noticed anyone ever ad-lib on or elaborate on or analyze. And I'm going to share it with you right now, because remember, Dr. King is the seal. He gives a name to what I'm claiming our ancestors were doing with air, fire, earth, and water. Listen, very short statement. Bull Connor next would say, "Turn the fire hoses on." As I said to you the other night, Bull Connor didn't know history. He knew a kind of physics that somehow didn't relate to the trans physics that we knew about. And that was the fact that there's a certain kind of fire that no water could put out. And we went before the fire hoses. We had known water. If we were Baptist or some other denomination, we had been immersed. If we were Methodist or some other, we had been sprinkled, but we knew water. That couldn't stop us. And we just went on before the dogs and we would look at them, and we go on before the water hoses and we would look at it, and we would just go on singing, "Just over my head, I see freedom in the air."
One of the elements.
He covers every single element. And if you just use a little bit of imagination, not only does he do that, but then he gives it a special name. He says, Bull Connor didn't know history, but he did know a kind of physics that didn't relate to the trans physics that we knew about. Now I said, hold on here, Mr. Dr. Luther King here. Where is this coming from? Trans physics? So I Google and I get in the dictionaries and I can't find any references to this. I can't find the word trans physics. I can't find any of the experts commenting on this particular aspect of his speech. And I said, what was so important that you needed to create a new word? He combined word trans, a prefix, with physics. And we know that the basic definition of physics at its simplest core represents the study of the 4 elements at its simplest, right? And then what's so powerful is that if you're not clear that he is talking about water in a way that Bull Connor
Satan, the elements were guiding her.
Mhm.
When you spoke about the fire, which in this case, we're really talking about God.
God.
He's the unconsuming fire.
Mhm.
But I wanted to put your book in here so people could get a sense of the connection where it speaks about spiritual health and body and motion and the
Mhm.
mind and body connection and how it all ties together, the correlation in what you were saying, because you were speaking some powerful things. I mean, it was when you said, Wayne, I was ready to say you had an epiphany, and then you said you read over this speech about Frederick Douglass. You
Mhm.
actually had one, and that revelation came to you as what he was talking about.
Yeah, yeah, because the Dr. King piece, let me show you that I'm not making things up about what
Oh,
Dr. King was saying. He goes on in the speech and he seals the deal with this one statement right here.
mhm,
In case you were doubtful that he was a very thoughtful man who used every single word with the precision of a surgeon, okay?
mhm,
He could have used miracle. He could have used any number of references. But
mhm,
what he was trying to describe was something there were no words to equate this power that was guiding us on our sojourn through freedom,
mhm,
that there were no words in the English language in existence at that point.
mhm,
So he had to create one to describe this power, this force that fueled those people through fire hoses, through the fear, through the intimidation, to the battalions over the head. There
mhm.
was something in the air. Just over my head, I see freedom in the air.
Air.
Remember, Mother Harriet Tubman said she was in the air, looking in the sky for the sign from the heavens. See, the Creator has communicated for health and freedom to us using these basic elements. And I would proffer that in the future, should we ever need to secure freedom and health again, those same tools are going to be what we have to master with our divine relationship. All of these people were master fasters, they were master prayers, they were deeply spiritual, and they had a sacred relationship with the Most High.
Yes.
Dr. King put it like this: and there was a power there which Bull Connor couldn't adjust to. So we ended up transforming Bull into a steer, and we won our struggle in Birmingham. Oh my God. Are you hearing this,
Yeah. I mean,
man? Now talk about the divine. Bull Connor, of all names in the world he could have had, it was like he was born for this singular moment. You see what Dr. King did with that man's name?
yeah.
He said, we turned bull into a steer. Now, I don't know if y'all know what a steer is, but it is a big animal. A
Yes.
steer
Yes, it is.
cannot reproduce itself. A bull is a powerful animal. But when you transform a bull into a steer, you take away its power. That's a form of spiritual castration. Bull Connor didn't know what happened to him.
No, my. Thank you for that enlightenment.
That was Dr. King. Why did he reveal that to us on the night before his assassination and not a minute before? I do not know. But I felt in my prayers and meditations that he was carrying something so heavy and so powerful that he knew that he must leave a clue for someone to pick up later on who had done the work, so that when we needed it again. And it makes me wonder why the protests, why all the public displays of rebellion are not as effective today as they were back then. And that's because I have come to the conclusion that there are no master trans physicists in the room. Dr. King was a master trans physicist, meaning, like Mother Harriet Tubman, who used her knowledge of the elements to navigate hundreds of people through the North and the South in an area where everything would count against her, and any wrong decision or move or miscalculation could be the end of her life, where Frederick Douglass invoked the Civil War and invited an EMP to set it off, and where Harriet Jacobs used her endurance of the four elements to outsmart and outwit Dr. Norcrum, who was enslaving her and brutalizing her and torturing her mentally, how she waged psychological war, but had to endure the elements in the process of doing so, so much so. And then we had Booker T. Washington leaves us a clue where he says, I pity the man or woman who has never learned to enjoy nature and to get strength and inspiration from it. This was a man who was under deep stress, deeply misunderstood, and who was at the cusp between freedom and slavery. I mean, he was an enslaved man who experienced freedom. And what is so interesting is that four of these individuals, Harriet Tubman, Harriet Jacobs, Frederick Douglass, and Booker T. Washington, were all a part of this special class of Black people who had experienced both slavery, bondage, and freedom through self-emancipation.
Yes.
Freedom and health. And all of them left us powerful clues that point us to these four elements. But what makes it all work for freedom and health is the fifth element, King, and that is divine intention. That is where the Most High comes in. Because as we can see, Bull Connor had access to the elements. He used it to destroy, to suppress, to oppress. So the elements themselves are neutral. People can use the elements to drown someone, they could burn flesh, or they could cook a meal. The key is divine intention. So I have a whole chapter in the book devoted to the fifth element, which is so vitally important in this day and time because it reveals the inner workings of how spiritual intention is. You cannot see someone's intention, but you only see the outcome of what their intentions are. And this is why so many of us are losing our lives every single day, because no one taught us this important lesson about how to evaluate intention, that just because the label or the stated objective seems to be productive, safe, healthy, friendly, like inviting someone to a party only to enslave them as a human trafficking, part of a human trafficking, circle, or to convince someone that, you have their best interests, but really you're there to exploit. So we have to teach our daughters and our sons about this fifth element. And I use four powerful stories to do what I explain as divine intention and wicked intention.
Ms. Brown, what chapter is that in?
That's the fifth chapter. And it's the fifth element that makes up what I call trans physics, or what Dr. King referred to as trans physics. And if you pay attention to the stories of each one of those individuals, the one thing that they all had in common, in addition to being able to maneuver, interpret, and utilize these four elements, is their relationship to the divine as expressed through their work. There's nothing more divine than helping others achieve their rightful human freedom and experience their divine purpose in life. That's what they all had in common. And what's so interesting in terms of the seal for me was Marcus Messiah Garvey. He closes the chapter because he personifies that as well. Even though he was not an enslaved person, he marries what Frederick Douglass said with what Dr. King says when he said, while he was in prison in 1925, falsely accused of mail fraud. And his biggest achievement was changing the mental paradigm of his people such that they saw themselves for the first time as men and women capable of not only governing themselves, but managing all aspects of commerce, putting ships on the sea, and standing up for governance of themselves as, at the time, Negroes. And he said, if death has power, then count on me in death to be the real Marcus Garvey I would like to be. If I may come as an earthquake, or a cyclone, or a plague, or pestilence, or as God would have me, then be assured that I shall never desert you and make your enemies triumph over you. Look for me in the whirlwind or the storm. Look for me all around you, for with God's grace, I shall come and bring with me countless millions of Black slaves who have died in America and the West Indies, and the millions in Africa, to aid you in your fight for liberty, freedom, and life. There's the connection between life and health. And some people may consider that harsh, but y'all don't know what our ancestors were going through 100 years ago. And so this book is so very special because I spend so much time providing statistical data,
Oh my, you did.
factual information, showing that not only did our enslaved ancestors have a powerful relationship with the elements, using it for freedom and health to secure those things, but even going back to ancient Ethiopia, where the beautiful women of Wolo, who were the direct descendants of Queen of Sheba, were using those powerful elements to beautify, to address infertility, to address wounds of their womb. Because remember, this is about self-care. And so what I'm trying to teach our daughters and our sons, who need to know how to relate to their future wives, their daughters, their sisters, their aunties, their community leaders, is that when we get back to those four elements and we start taking care of our crown, which is the head, not just the hair, right? And we have to think about not just making this beautiful hair look pretty, and we can do anything at the expense of the eyes and the brain and the ears and the mouth, but that all of these things correspond to the elements. And so the secret to securing their health and the beautification of them is the elements. The scriptures talk about the eyes being the lamp of the soul, right? Yes. They correspond to the fire element. That's when we see people and they've lost all life in form of them. And we see in the horror movies, you see someone that is void of the light. They call them zombies, right? The light in the eye represents the fire element. And the fire is the all-consuming fire, right? That's the evidence. And then the nose, that corresponds to the air element. And the ear, ironically, the tool that deals with vibration, corresponds to the earth element. And people don't realize it, that the earth is always moving, and therefore it always makes sound through vibration. And ironically, when I was writing this, it occurred to me that the first three letters of the word earth is ear. Cute. Nothing that they're, not that they're etymologically related, but there was a clue that I was headed in the right direction. And mouth, even as I speak, I'm being moisturized, like there's water in my mouth. That corresponds to the water element. So right here on our head are the four elements of fire, air, earth, and water, which is the clue about how we have to take care of those things. And then the other part of the temple that I direct women to is the womb area. This is the creative center for life. And then the feet, which is the grounding area. This is when you are a grounded woman or a grounded man, you are rooted in logic and reasoning. And so what I refer to the book as the divine self-care strategy, a wellness guide to total body alignment, is because when a woman's head, womb, and feet are in perfect working order, she can not only fulfill her divine purpose in life more readily, but she receives divine inspiration from on high, she's meditative and getting these powerful downloads. And then she has the tools that enable her to interpret the data in her environment. Our eyes are like a camera, but we have a physical eye and we have a spiritual eye. So when women are taught to do the eye cleanses, they're taught the spiritual process. In other words, when you're using a hot potato, like I show women how to do in the chapter 9 of my book, How to Cleanse the Eye, what I'm teaching them all of this cleansing processes, now that I've built the foundation, there's no question that Sheila isn't just making some stuff up for fun, right? It's all rooted in the power of our divine relationship as evidenced through scripture and through our ancestors' evidenced speeches, poems, spirituals, writings, biographies, and their best intentions. The story of how I was really starting to connect the dots that African women have made immense contributions to this realm of wellness. And that was important for me because I wanted my children, my children's children, and even us today to recognize that we don't have to go so many other cultures, that we don't have to adopt so many foreign terms and languages, that if we just open our hearts and our eyes and our minds, we can see that there's some beautiful metaphors and words that originate among African people describe. And what I'm talking about is, and I have a great deal of respect for East Indian people, and their traditions are amazing. They've made some immense contributions. But Indian women have yonis, and yoni is being used to describe the woman's most sacred reproductive area. You can use your imagination, right?
Right.
And I like that term for Indian women and people who are of the Eastern Asian tradition. It's a Sanskrit word. But we are the oldest people in the world. Can we find some African languages that describe our relationship to the reproductive health organ? As a woman, I went on a journey to discover the origins of this healing process that I talk about in my book, known today as hydrotherapy or womb therapy or vaginal steaming, which is a very powerful way to use all four of the elements to help address all number of issues. It's relaxing, it's healing, it's cleansing, it's beautiful, and it originated among African women. And what I found was that the Sisters of Ethiopia not only have the most extensive healing process that engages the womb, the head, and all the organs that I mentioned, just like my grandmother used to obsess over with me, and the feet, but they have a beautiful word that they use among themselves as women and for their daughters to teach them about how to progress into womanhood, and even between lovers. And that word is dabo, and it means beautiful bread. Can you imagine that sweet term being used to describe and replace what the rappers are calling WAP, right? And all of these horrific terms that kind of dehumanize women and diminish women in the sacredness of that part, right? And something outside of the Eastern Indian traditions, because it's important that our children be able to reflect the brilliance and ingenuity in themselves, so that they don't always have to look to other cultures outside of the African origin, outside of our origin as the children of the Most High, to identify healing strategies and wellness strategies. And so as a Pan-Africanist and as a woman of God, a daughter of the Most High, that was important to me to do in this book, because we learned a hard lesson not too long ago. And that lesson was, when we keep directing our sons' attention away from the beauty of their own mothers, to appreciate our hair texture, our skin tones, our body types, our phenotypes, our particular way of being in the world, they will believe us. If we constantly put on wigs and long hair and bleach our skins, they will believe us, and they will settle for what we can do to mimic white women until they could get one legally. And so now you see this proliferation of all the young Black athletes, not all, but many.
I get it.
Once they achieve a certain level of status, they no longer desire to be with a woman who looks like me, who looks like their mother. And so we're partly to blame for that, because we have set the tone. So what I teach our daughters is, when you make a man fall in love with you, make him fall in love with that face right there, that bare face, so that when he is ready to feel elated about when you get excited and dress up, It's something to look forward to, but not expected. This is the expectation. And so there are all these beautiful gems of wisdom that I'm sharing with our
Oh
daughters
my,
and sons.
I have a bag of them over here. And no, thank you for all that you said. And if it was one thing you would like to say, or a few things you would like to say in closing about your book, or about life, or the things that are instilled in us, as it said, God has put everything in us that we need.
Mhm.
And I like the way you put it because you spoke about it in your book.
Yeah.
I'm
We
gonna,
come from a powerful legacy of healers and freedom fighters. And if the last 3 or 4 years has not taught us anything, it should be taught to us wherever you stand on this spectrum of trust and medicine and vaccines, is that there is absolutely a connection between freedom and health. And that you are to never surrender your own curiosity, your own ingenuity, and replace it in the blind faith of governance, of people in power who don't know
yes.
you, don't know your grandmother, don't have a clue as to what your divine purpose is in the world, and might not even like you or think you deserve to exist. While you are on this planet, assume more responsibility for your way of being in the world, for your survivability, and for your ability to thrive. Take ownership of medicine, take ownership of healing, and take ownership, and always remember there's a connection between freedom and health, and that this book, The Divine Self-Care Strategy, is just one tool of many that can help guide you along the process to beginning that journey and to continuing it more intentionally if you've already started it. And that's pretty much all that I have to say, Kim.
Hear that, people? You heard it from Sheila Brown, author of The Divine Strategy. You heard it from her. Don't settle. You have the opportunity to make choices, smart choices, educated choices, and take control of your health. Take control of your health. I know a few medical professionals that you had to take control of your health. And I like what you said about this governance. You can't just believe everything that just comes down from the White House. You just can't. Thank you, Ms. Brown, gracing us with your presence and being a part of this author showcase. And I'm really glad actually that you actually came on last because you got more time. It's just like it's somebody we're preaching and they're in the spirit. Don't want to just end it. They just the spirit's high, they just keep going.
There's so much more to say, and there's so much more that I could share, but we're strapped for time. So hopefully we've been able to create enough interest.
Oh yes,
from what I
and
shared.
then we will actually probably do another series of the Women's Authors Showcase. This is going to be series 1, and as I told you, after this is going to be museum and Black historical places.
Mhm.
And we're going to have men authors. We're going to have the men come in. So yes, it's interesting. This is something that David and I thought this would be a good thing to do, to get all these talented people in this paper, clump them into these showcases for those who people want to participate, and let people hear from your story, and then we'll edit it and put it together. Because I put you in a commercial, you're in it now. Even though you were talking, I put a author's women's commercial together a week ago. Once I got your pictures and all, put your book and everything, it's in there. You'll see it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited about what you and Baba David are doing.
Yes,
You all are visionary. You're the connectors that are
we're
connecting the
grateful.
dots.
We're just grateful. We're grateful. Trust me, we're grateful. We're grateful to have people like such as yourself and all those who came before you that all want to participate, and we were able to get them in the front of the camera.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be blessed in your endeavors as you go forth, and enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
You too, beloved. Have a great day.
Same to you.
Hi, everyone. As a book publisher, my job is to find authors who can create books that sell. I work with authors' agents, who screen the work of writers. I also provide feedback and guidance to authors to help them improve their craft and meet the market demands. These are platforms that allow you to share your articles with your followers and network. Some examples are Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
The authors in this showcase have shared their inspiration, why they wrote these books, and how they are doing since they'd been published.
The calming effect of the water in Hawaii would sure ease the writer's mind and broaden their imagination by letting the creative juices flow. Congratulations on your book's success. You must be very proud and happy. It's a great achievement and a lot of responsibility. To be yourself in a world that constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Thanks for watching the commercial. If you want to promote your book or service, contact Wayne Randall at wyourfinanceinfo.com. This is the National Black Unity News production.
Stay tuned. Next week we'll have Museums and Historical Places featuring Esther Armstrong, Dr. Joanne Martin, and Ronald Miles.
Shutterstock Music.